Have you ever pondered about the profound ways God provides for us in our lives? It's a thought that, once dwelled upon, reveals the magnitude of His love and care. As we navigate our existence, we often overlook the subtle ways in which God's provisions and blessings shape our journey. To truly grasp the depth of His divine providence, we must revisit an age-old tale of survival and faith. To understand this, we journey back in time to the Israelites in the wilderness and the miracle of manna. Imagine being in a desolate wilderness with no food in sight. This was the plight of the Israelites. The Israelites, led by Moses, had escaped the clutches of Pharaoh's slavery, but found themselves wandering in a desolate wilderness. The jubilation of their newfound freedom soon turned into despair as their food supplies dwindled. The wilderness was harsh and unforgiving, offering no sustenance for the weary travelers. In the face of mounting desperation, the Israelites cried out to Moses, their anguish echoing in the vast expanse of the barren desert. They longed for the pots of meat and bread they had in Egypt, even if it meant going back to a life of servitude. Their faith wavered, their hope faltered, and their stomachs growled in protest. And then, in the midst of their despair, something miraculous happened. When the morning dew lifted, it revealed a fine, flaky substance as delicate as frost on the ground. It was manna, a food unknown to them, a gift from God. The Israelites were instructed to gather just enough for each day, a test of their obedience and faith in God's provision. On the sixth day, they gathered twice as much, for God had commanded that the seventh day, the Sabbath, be a day of rest. The manna was like coriander seed, white, and it tasted like wafers made with honey. It was not just physical sustenance, but also a spiritual nourishment, a tangible proof of God's faithfulness and love. Every morning, as the sun rose, the manna appeared, feeding the Israelites, sustaining them through their 40-year journey in the wilderness. The manna was a symbol of God's constant presence, His unwavering faithfulness, and His promise to provide for His people. In their time of despair and need, God did not abandon His people. He provided them with manna, a food from heaven, a miracle in the wilderness. This divine provision was not merely about satisfying physical hunger, but also about teaching the Israelites and us today about reliance on God's faithfulness, about His constant presence, and about His boundless love. And so, in their hour of need, God provided them with manna, a miraculous food, a sign of His enduring love and faithfulness. But the manna was not just physical sustenance. It held deeper, spiritual meaning. The story of manna in the wilderness is rich with symbolism. It serves as a profound representation of God's faithfulness and provision. Manna, a heavenly food that appeared mysteriously every morning, was God's answer to the Israelites' desperate hunger. But more than just filling their bellies, it was a daily reminder of God's constant presence and care. This divine provision wasn't just about physical sustenance. It was a tangible sign of God's covenant with His people. Manna symbolized God's promise to provide, to be faithful, and to sustain His people throughout their journey, no matter how arduous. It was a testament to the fact that God would not abandon His people in their time of need. The manna also served as a lesson of dependence and trust. The Israelites could gather only enough for each day, teaching them to rely on God's daily provision rather than hoarding or relying on their own strength. This was a powerful lesson in humility and faith, emphasizing the need to trust God for daily needs and acknowledging His role as the ultimate provider. So, while the Israelites saw manna as a means to satisfy their physical hunger, it held a much deeper spiritual significance. It was a symbol of God's unwavering love, His steadfast faithfulness, and His promise to provide for His chosen people. In essence, the manna from heaven was a physical manifestation of God's unwavering provision and care. Fast forward to today, and we find the echoes of manna in our own Christian faith. The story of manna, you see, is not just a tale from the distant past, but a living testament of God's enduring faithfulness, reminding us of His constant provision. Now, how does this story resonate with us today? Consider the parallels between the manna in the wilderness and our spiritual sustenance. The manna was a daily gift from God, a physical nourishment that kept the Israelites going. Today, God provides us with spiritual manna, nourishing our souls and strengthening our faith. This spiritual manna comes in many forms. It can be the peace we feel in our hearts during a storm, the strength we find in times of weakness, or the wisdom that guides us when we're lost. Not only does God provide for our spiritual needs, but He also attends to our physical necessities. The same God who rained down manna from heaven continues to bless us with our daily bread, whether it's the food on our table, the roof over our heads, or the jobs that sustain us. And here's the beautiful thing. Just like the Israelites, we are invited to trust in God's provision every day, to wake up each morning and gather our manna, our daily blessings, with gratitude and faith. Just as he did with the Israelites, God continues to provide for us, in ways we often fail to recognize. The story of manna isn't just a tale from the past. It holds invaluable lessons for our faith journey today. If we pause and reflect, we can identify instances in our own lives where we have experienced God's provision and sustenance. Perhaps it was a time of financial struggle when an unexpected opportunity presented itself. Or maybe it was during a period of emotional turmoil when a comforting word came at the right moment. These are our manna experiences, reminders of God's constant care and provision. Practical reliance on God's provision is an essential aspect of Christian living. It's about trusting in His timing, His wisdom, and His love. It's about acknowledging our limitations and recognizing that we are not self-sufficient. We can incorporate this trust in our daily lives by starting each day with a prayer for our needs, expressing gratitude for His provision, and sharing our manna with others. Remember, God's provision is always there, just like the manna, waiting for us to reach out and accept. So what does the story of manna teach us about God's provision? Well, it underscores the enduring significance of God's providence in our lives. Through the tale of manna, we're reminded of His infinite faithfulness and sustenance, echoing the same divine provision we experience as Christians today. This narrative resonates with our faith journey, reinforcing our trust in His provision. It serves as a timeless reminder to trust in His faithfulness, knowing that He will provide for our needs in His perfect time and way.